Alrighty, everybody. It is currently Thursday, January, what is it, 8th, 2026, and I'm coming at you live from the beautiful island paradise of Fiji, because this is how people talk in Fiji. No, I don't know what a Fijian accent feels like. It probably does have a little bit of British influence in it. But I swear to God, I do remember some sort of like Adam Sandler or like early 2000s kind of racist comedy movie, or not even racist with like an intent of malice or whatever, but just a generally ignorant um like early 2000s comedy movie where they were in like Hawaii or fucking like Samoa or some shit, and everyone there had Jamaican accents. I don't know, it might have been like, I feel like Disney Channel might have gotten up to something like that, but whatever. It's not the point of this episode. This episode is about the 2000 Fiji coup d'etat. As we'll come to find out in this episode, coups are, we think of these as an African trend, but Fiji has been getting really into coups over the past about 40 years. Over the past 40 years, coups have become a, a fun trend that they do in Fiji. You know what I mean? Over here, we had like the Tide Pod trend, fucking the cinnamon challenge, shit like that. In Fiji, it's like get an armed group of nationalists and go like storm a government building. Like that's their that's the TikTok trends they have going on over in Fiji. In Fiji, it's, you don't think of like tourist destinations as hot spots for, you know, that level of nationwide instability, but they are. I guess Fiji is, but Fiji, I looked this up yesterday. I looked up, is Fiji mineral rich, and then obviously it gave me an answer about the water. Turns out the actual country of Fiji actually is pretty mineral rich. They have gold, zinc, and a few other types of minerals, and then they also are big, a big sugar place for some reason. I don't know. Once again, it just feels like the perfect island destination to where it's like, fuck it, you don't need any of that other shit. You don't need the mining and the fucking sugar, especially the sugarcane farming. Like that feels like real third world, like a real third world type of activity. But I guess not. I guess they're still planting sugarcane on there. I don't know. Maybe it's like my bias as an American of thinking of like places that produce shit like that as like all banana republics run by dictators or whatever. But still, you'd imagine they'd be able to depend pretty strongly on tourism. But I mean, that's a big part of their economy. But they also got all this other shit going on, as we'll come to find out over the course of this episode. In the Fijians, this is our second war in a Melanesian country that we're talking about. Which, if you don't know, all like those Pacific islands out there, like New Zealand, Fiji, obviously, the Hawaiian Islands, all that shit, it's actually split up into three different sections. One is Micronesia, and they're their own like ethnic group and cultural group or whatever. And then you have Polynesia, which is probably the most famous. That's like New Zealand, Tonga, Hawaii, Tahiti, I think. And then you have Melanesia. And Melanesia, as the name kind of implies, they're a darker group of people, and they live a little bit closer to like Australia, Papua New Guinea, like Southeast Asia kind of region. That's where they live at, and that's what Fiji is. The other Melanesian war that we talked about, not, I guess you could call it a war. It was a little bit more of an uprising, I'd say. Was Bougainville. We talked about Bougainville. They're trying to become a country or whatever. Uh, in the Fijians, I'd describe them, at least in the way they look and from what I could tell about their culture, they're a little bit more Polynesian than they are similar to the boys over in Bougainville. They get a little bit more like that kind of angry look, you know what I mean, that some Polynesians have, where they got like those big ass eyebrows or whatever. Sorry, I'm still coughing. Um, but yeah, that's kind of the look in general. I get more of a Polynesian vibe from the Fijians than I did the Bougainvillians, Bogans, whatever you want to call them. Um, so yeah, that's a little bit of background information on Fiji. like I said, big. We're gonna figure out who started or why the trend started and why it's still going on. You know, the trend of coups in Fiji. I mean, in one of the coups, there was potentially CIA involvement. I'm sure there was. I'm sure there was. Every coup, that's like you kind of assume that going into a coup. You know what I mean? It's like when you turn on the NBA, you're like, I'm gonna see some black guys on the court. You know what I mean? Like that's what that's what the CIA is to coups. It's just like it, it's a given that there was some sort of CIA involvement. Although in the 2000 coup, I don't know, but a whole lot of coups, dude. It's a fucking chicken coop up in there. A whole lot of coups going on. Coup, coup, coup. I don't know if that's. I guess that's kind of a chicken's more of a bok than a coup. I don't know what sort of bird makes a coup noise, but I'm sure there is one out there. And that's what Fiji is. It's a collection of birds just cooing constantly. Coos and coos and coos. Um, yeah, lots of coups going on over there. Not super violent coups. Like when there's a coup in most other parts of the like Fiji knows how to handle a coup, I'd say. You know, there's a little bit of violence. There's a little bit of violence going on. But when coups happen in other parts of the world, it's a lot more disastrous. You know what I mean? Like I said, coups are a trend in Fiji. It's the big thing. It's hot. You know what I mean? It's like baggy jeans or whatever. It's in. Coups are in Fiji. Um, and so they know how to handle it. A lot less violent, a lot less bloodshed, a lot more. The government kind of gets back to what it needs to be doing, all that sort of stuff. Yeah, so Fiji's good at handling coups. I would like to be involved in a Fiji coup. I know in the most recent current events episode, I talked about how I want to be a mineral dictator in Africa. If I can't do that and the CIA is listening, let me get involved in a coup in Fiji. That sounds so fun. It literally sounds like a fucking Far Cry game. You know what I mean? Overthrowing the Fijian government sounds like a Far Cry game. Uh, so yeah, CIA, Mossad, CCP, whoever's listening to this, Australia maybe. I know Australia might throw me in there because they're pretty close to Fiji. You want to throw me in there? I'd be more than happy. I'd be more than happy to be involved in a coup in Fiji. And I don't need, you know what I mean? I don't need to become the dictator of Fiji. I don't even know if I can. I think you have to be Fijian to be the leader of Fiji. Um, but I would look if I do become the dictator, great. If I don't, a coup in Fiji at least sounds like a fun time. It sounds like a fun time. You know what I mean? You're rolling up, unbuttoned Hawaiian shirt, AK-47, being like, "Who are we getting?" That's what I imagine. You know, you're on like one of like those steel Somalian pirate boats, just chilling with your AK-47, smoking a cigarette, gold chain swinging in the wind. God, getting ready to overthrow a government sounds like a great fucking time. I don't know about you guys, but being involved in a military coup in Fiji, which I don't know if there's any other type, I think you need a little bit of military force behind you. Maybe it's not necessarily a military guy leading the coup, but you need a little bit of military force behind you. And I'd be more than happy to be part of that. Do I have any military experience? No, but Fiji would be a nice introduction. You know what I mean? It's a nice little playground to test out your mercenary skills. I'd say that's what Fiji is. And maybe you end up staying in Fiji. I don't know. I didn't Google Fijian women. I should have. Maybe they got some thigums over there. You know what I mean? They got some big old Fijian badonkadonks. I don't. Maybe you end up staying in Fiji when the CIA hires you to do the coup. But I do think it just sounds like a fun experience to me. I don't know. Some people want to go to a Buddhist temple in Thailand or some bullshit like that. I want to be involved in a Fijian coup or anywhere else in fucking I'll go to Bougainville. I don't want to go to Papua New Guinea. That's a little bit too scary for me. But Fiji is also pretty scary. If you don't know the history of Fiji, they had a lot of ritual cannibalism. They were munching people. That was a big thing in Polynesia, Melanesia island like warfare culture was eating people to prove. So I don't know why they were munching people, but yeah, Fiji. So it is a little bit more scary and they were doing it recently. This isn't like some super old like 1600 Stone Age type of stuff. They were munching on people. I think into the 20th century. As a part of their warfare. They weren't just munching for the sake of it. They were munching as part of their warfare. But let's get into it. We're going to be going over a little bit of general history of Fiji. I kind of gave you guys some of the background information on it. General history of Fiji, but we're going to be focusing specifically on the coups, because the coups all kind of have a similar vein to them. They all have something in common. And so this is our intro. The 2000 Fijian coup d'etat. So on May 19th, 2000, Fijian Special Forces soldiers led by businessman George Speight stormed the Fijian parliament and took the government hostage. Whole government. In the parliament, that is their version of like Congress. It's all like their elected officials, their legislators and whatever. They're legislators and stuff like that. This is their version of like the senators in the House of Representatives or whatever. That's what parliament is. And like I was saying, a lot of coups you think of being led by like generals or admirals or some like lieutenant or colonel in the military. That's what you think of when you think of most coups. And then there's like a few others where you're like, oh yeah, like a disgruntled vice president will come in. Very rarely do you think of coups being led by businessmen. But as we'll come to find out, this coup is not similar, but kind of has some things in common, I guess, with the Bougainville War of Independence. Or I don't even know. It was a failed War of Independence, so I think they just call it like the Bougainville conflict or some shit like that. But it has some things in common with that where it's a lot more business oriented. There's definitely ideology involved in it, but a lot of the ideology is linked to business, I'll say. And so as a colony of the British from 1874 to 1970, Fiji was ethnically divided between the Aitauke, which are the natives, and the Indo-Fijians, who were the descendants of Indian indentured servants. Quote. I don't know why we're still doing the whole indentured servant thing. It's like, it's just a slave. I mean, can we call a slave a slave? Sometimes you call a spade a spade. In this situation, we're calling a slave a slave. Indentured servants are just slaves. And so that's what these Indo-Fijians are. They're descended from, I forget which part of India, but I don't know, probably a tropical part of India. And yeah, they were brought over as slaves for the British, and pretty decent amount of them. There's actually it's not a small minority of these people. It's actually about half, at least at some point, of people in Fiji were, or are, maybe still, I don't know, Indo-Fijians. And also in this episode, we're going to have a lot of Polynesian words and names and stuff, or I guess not Polynesian, Melanesian, but they sound Polynesian and Melanesian names sound very similar. It'll be like, my name is Jeff. My name is Jeff. Like we're going to be dealing with a lot of shit like that. And this name, that Ituke, Ituke, Tauke, Itauke. The fucking natives. I'll be calling them the natives, the indigenous, or the Autaike. Spelled very weird. The first letter is not a capital letter. It's a lowercase I, and then the T after that is capital. Guys, this is fucking English. This isn't whatever fucking language you're writing in. This is English. First letter is capitalized. I don't know what we're doing here. I don't even know how that comes into the pronunciation of it. But I'm just going to be calling them the Autaike, if that's okay with everybody. And this is not a group of people I would like to piss off. The Fijians, this guy George Speight, we're going to talk a little bit about his family, but he's like a pretty quintessential Fijian. I think like 2 of his nephews are professional fucking rugby players, because that's just the type of people that Fiji pumps out. So yeah, not a group of people I want to make angry for a multitude of reasons. It seems like they're pretty willing to just fully do a coup whenever. So I don't think they're averse to violence, and also they're just fucking huge, so they could just beat me to death. That's the other reason I don't want to upset them too much. So, but fix the fucking spelling of the name Itauke. And so when Fiji gained independence in 1970, the constitution was written with the intention of maintaining native political dominance over the Indo-Fijians despite a roughly equal split of demographics. And that's what I was talking about with the 50-50. And this is pretty much going to set up all the rest of our coups, is that the native Fijians believe that they should have political dominance, but also there's a lot of economic dominance that the native Fijians believe they should have over the Indo-Fijians. I don't know. I guess their justification is we're the fucking natives, so we should be the ones who control it. I wonder if if they're like chanting "Go back to fucking India." You know what I mean? I wonder if they have a little bit of that in them. But yeah, they write this constitution. I guess the Indo-Fijians didn't get any fucking input when it came to writing the constitution, because the 1970 constitution was basically like, dude, the Itauke rule, fucking, both like in terms of like we rule like we're sick as fuck, but also we're gonna rule over you. We're gonna rule over this island nation of Fiji. And the Indo-Fijians, it wasn't like necessarily that they were their rights were restricted. I guess kind of, because it was like an Indo-Fijian couldn't become prime minister. So, but it wasn't like full on like forced segregation type of thing. It was a little bit more like just stay over there. That's kind of what they did to the Indo-Fijians. Definitely racist, definitely still racist, but not not to the point where they were like, all right, not to like the point of like genocide or like deportation of just everyone who was of the Indo-Fijian ethnicity. It wasn't to that level, but they didn't want them to have political power. So racist, yes. As racist as they could have been, no. That's what I have to say about the 1970 Constitution. So parties quickly formed along ethnic lines, with the Alliance Party backed by the Aitaike and the Labor/National Federation parties backed by the Indo-Fijians. And so the Aitauke, Tauke, whatever, they're a little bit more conservative. A lot of these Indo-Fijian parties are like center left. That's kind of where they hang out a little bit. Obviously, they don't want to go too far left, because a lot of these Indo-Fijians are pretty wealthy. They manage pretty large businesses, whether it's a lot of it is sugar plantations, because I think that's why they were brought over to the island in the first place. And so a lot of them are involved in things like that. And so they don't go too far over to the left, but they're a little bit more leftist than a lot of the Itauke politicians and parties and stuff like that. And obviously the Itauke, their parties are more conservative, wanting to conserve the power of the natives and stuff like that. So that's a little bit of the politics of these parties. And so in 1987, Colonel Sitiveni Rabuka, and this guy, he's a Itauke native Fijian. He staged 2 coups after the Labor government won 2 elections, and this set the precedent that military intervention could be used to maintain. Let's see what else I wrote. Could be used to maintain Itauke political dominance. And so this is kind of how and why coups became so big in Fiji. It's basically whenever the Indo-Fijians are gaining a lot of power in parliament, or one becomes the prime minister, the Itauke kind of get really like amped up and nationalistic, and then they have a nice little coup. And one thing that's important to remember is even like the military and like the politics of it all, even that is split along ethnic lines. Even things that aren't, it's not where you'd expect it to be. Like you'd expect that at least like the military is able to be super cohesive just because they kind of have to be, but that's not the case. It's pretty hard split along ethnic lines everywhere. It's a pretty segregated country in terms of the Itauke, or at least it was. Pretty segregated with the Itauke and the Indo-Fijian. So even the military, it has a split alliance, at least, between the Itauke and the Indo-Fijians. And so, yeah, that's how this became such a big That's how coups became such a big trend in Fiji. It was like this one worked after the Indo-Fijians gained too much power in parliament. So they were like, fuck it. We're just going to keep doing this. It worked the first time. It worked in 1987. Let's keep the ball rolling. Let's keep doing coups. And so in 1997, Fiji adopted a new constitution which promoted multi ethnic power sharing and allowed an Indo Fijian to become prime minister. So, like I said, the Aitauke, they really want to maintain political dominance. Um, and a lot of this links back to like their original, like island wide, and Fiji's a pretty big island. This isn't like Tahiti or some shit, or I don't know, Bora Bora, is that an island? It's pretty fucking sizable island. And so back in the day, they had like different tribes, I guess, or different like clans, whatever they want to call them, and they had like a bunch of different chiefs and shit. And a lot of the Aitauke politics kind of links back to that traditional setup that they had going on. Um, and then obviously they have the more modern setup, and they're like, fuck it, we're going to control this too. They want complete political dominance in their country. And once again, Indo-Fijians, not a small minority. They're about split 50-50. And so it's kind of crazy that it took until 1997 for for them to be like, yeah, f- half of this country is Indo-Fijian. Fuck it, we'll let one become prime minister. And I don't know how this works. I know like France kind of has this set up too, um, where they have a prime minister and a president. I don't know if an Indo-Fijian at this point could become a president as well. And is there like a separate election for the president? Because the way a parliament system works is whichever party has the most seats in parliament or whatever, they choose who the prime minister is. That's how prime ministers work. It's usually like the head of the party becomes the prime minister. So I have no idea how they fucking. I guess there's a separate election for the president, and then I don't know how that interacts with Congress, because the prime minister is also part of the executive branch, like the president is. It's fucking weird. I don't know how that works. Fiji's not a big country. Like I said, they're not as small as you might think, but they're definitely not a big fucking country by any means. So it's like doing all like this complicated, convoluted bullshit. It's like, of course you've had 90,000 fucking coups, dude. You're doing too much. I don't even know if Fiji needs a fucking Congress, to be honest with you. They just need a fucking guy in a Hawaiian shirt who like smokes cigars and stuff like that. And it's like, yeah, he's kind of a dictator, but he's like a chill, like Seychelles, like island time type of dictator. That's what Fiji needs. It's kind of what they had for a while, as we'll come to find out later in this episode. And so anyway, they rewrite the Constitution in 1997, or they have a new one, and they're like, fine, you guys can become a prime minister too. Don't know if you guys can become a president or not. So this is in 1997. And so this would foment an indigenous nationalist backlash, as many Aitauke saw it as an infringement of indigenous rights and customary land ownership. And a lot of this customary land ownership, that's where it's called like the Great Council of Chiefs, I think is what it's called. That's where it starts to sort of tie into the larger, more modern, I guess, formal political landscape. That's where the two start to get intertwined, because control over this land, I guess, is dictated at least in part by the Great Council of Chiefs. And obviously the chiefs are the representatives of each individual tribe and stuff like that. And so the government, they'll like lease the land and all that bullshit. And I'm sure they decide, I'm sure it's kind of like an American, like Indian reservation type of setup, where it's like you can kind of do different shit on the traditional land, although I'm not 100% sure. And so yeah, that's why the Indo-Fijians are starting to get hyped up again. They had those two coups in 1987, or that's why the Aitauke are starting to get a little bit hyped up again. They had those two coups in 1987. I don't remember what happens between 1987 and 1997, but obviously the Aitauke are starting to see that their political power is slipping. Just even the possibility of an Indo-Fijian prime minister is enough to get them a little bit hyped up. I don't know. Maybe the Indo-Fijians are out for revenge. Maybe that's what the Aitauke are thinking. I don't exactly know. But they're starting to get it hyped up a little bit. And they're saying, Are they going to fuck with the Great Council of Chiefs? Are they going to take away their political power? Are they going to start, demanding that they be able to use our lands? Mm. But that's kind of the thought that a lot of the Italke are having at this time. And so in 1999, Mehed Maharajra, fuck it, some fucking Indian name, right? Chowdhury, I'm just gonna call him Chowdhury. Chowdhury, who was an Indo-Fijian, became prime minister after a coalition of multiracial parties swept the elections, gaining 54 of 71 seats in parliament. And so basically all these parties came together. It was like the Labor Party, and a whole bunch of other parties came together, and they were like, this is our kind of left wing or center left, a little bit more left wing, Indo-Fijian alliance of parties. And then I think the Itauke parties were kind of a little bit split up, but still 54 of 71 seats in parliament. They have the overwhelming majority, this alliance, that are all kind of thinking the same. They are technically different parties, but they're part of this fucking alliance, and they have 54 of 71 seats. And obviously this is way too fucking much for the Itauke. They're like, all right, we were saying we would let one of you guys become prime minister. We didn't fucking think it would actually happen. Now it's time to do a coup. All right, that's basically the setup for this whole thing. So I thought I was gonna say something else, but I didn't. And so anyway, Chowdhury's government was technically multi-ethnic, but it was heavily backed by Indo-Fijians, and it challenged entrenched business and traditional elites. So I don't know what they mean by I guess like the royal families, because I know Hawaii had like a kingdom type of setup, but Fiji also has chiefs, and I'm sure a lot of those chiefs have a lot of money, because like I said, the customary land ownership kind of flows through these guys. And so if someone wants to have like a sugar plantation or whatever on these customary lands, then that the chief's going to see a lot of kickback from that. And so I think that's what they mean by traditional elites. And then a lot of these entrenched businesses that we're talking about here, I'm sure there's mining, but it's also a lot of like real estate, hotels, tourism, shit like that. And Chowdhury is challenging that. And Chowdhury, he was part of that big alliance, but the specific party that he was a part of was the Fiji Labor Party. And so he might even be a little bit more left wing than a lot of the other people in the alliance. He might even be a little bit further than them, just because I know labor parties historically have a lot of ties to socialism and shit like that. And so he's Indo-Fijian, but he's also maybe not socialist, but definitely pretty left wing. And so he's kind of pissing a lot of people off. He's not just pissing off the Itauke. He's pissing everybody off, right? And so you kind of have this combination of these rich business people who have the money to be able to kind of propagandize and get a lot of the Itauke riled up. And obviously the Itauke are mad that an Indo-Fijian has become the prime minister. And so it's kind of this perfect storm when Chowdhury gets elected to have another coup or some sort of a civil conflict happen, just because you have the massive numbers of people, the massive numbers of Itauke who are pissed off about it, and then you have the business people who have a lot of the money and the influence and the power and stuff that can provide the pissed off masses with the things that they need. And so it's kind of this perfect storm for a coup to happen once again in Fiji. And then there's some other things that the Itauke are pissed off about that we'll talk about right here. And so in the late 1990s and the early 2000s, falling sugar prices began to hurt Indo-Fijian farmers, while Itauke faced high unemployment and perceived economic marginalization. That's what it said. It said they felt like they were being economically marginalized. I don't know. I don't know enough about the economy of Fiji to know if they were being economically marginalized or not, but at the very least they perceived it like that. And obviously they have very high unemployment rates to begin with, right? And so I think that in and of itself could be viewed as some sort of economic uh, marginalization. So once again, that's a little bit more fuel to the fire. Is that even the Indo-Fijians are a little bit pissed off at the government at this point, just because their sugar isn't worth as much. It's just not worth as much, and so they're a little bit already fucking pissed off. And then the ITLK are just mad. They're just mad to begin with. Really, there is an economic element to it, but it's also it heavily follows ethnic lines. I'll just say that. And so this combined with Chowdhury's policies, which threatened business interests and nationalist politicians, it caused a national and elite opposition, or a nationalist and elite opposition to form. And so once again, he pisses off all the right people to the point where a coup it just has to happen, or at the very least, there's going to be something major that happens. Just because if you piss off just the rich people, then it's like something will happen. Some people will start getting money, but it's whatever. You can deal with that situation. And if you piss off just the masses, then it's kind of like, well, I'm the government. I have all this money in this military. Fuck you. I don't have to listen to you, right? But if you piss off both of those two groups of people, and especially if you're kind of pissing off your own people with the Indo-Fijian farmers not being able to make money or as much money off their sugarcane, then you're kind of fucked. You got to choose which group you're going to kind of subjugate and piss off, because you can't do both. That's the downfall of a lot of these, of really every country, is that they piss off the rich and the poor masses, right? It's why the Soviet Union fell. The masses were fucking being overworked, sent to gulags, having their religious rights infringed upon and shit like that. Then obviously the rich people had all their money taken away, or they were made a part of the communist government. And so it's just like this perfect, you got both people fucking hating you at the same time. And that's not good for business. You know what I mean? If you are a Fijian prime minister or president. And so the main figurehead of this opposition was George Speight, who was an indigenous businessman whose father, Sam Speight, was a politician. Didn't say what Sam Speight did. I don't know. He might have served in parliament or some shit like that. And then it was his uncle or his brother. I can't remember. George Speight's uncle or brother. He was also a member of parliament. And so this guy's he's a part of that traditional elite that we were talking about, or at the very least, indigenous elite. Dad's a politician. Other family members are politicians. Nephews are fucking rugby players. He's part of that indigenous elite, and he kind of emerges as this figurehead that represents both like the business side of it, but also like the traditional power structure side of it. He kind of represents both of these things, and so he's kind of the perfect leader for this movement, because he is like, dude, we need a return to like Itaukei power. We need a return to like all that shit. I fuck with the Great Council of Chiefs and all that, but he's also like, I might build a hotel. Right? He's this perfect storm once again. And so Speight, a.k.a. Ilakimi Naitini, he claimed to represent the Great Council of Chiefs and had rejected the Great Council of Chiefs, who had rejected the government's plan to renew leases in 1999. So that was, like I was saying, Speight, businessman, also, he's fucking with the old way of doing shit, the old power structures, the old Great Council of Chiefs, you know what I mean? Munching somebody's heart. That's Speight's down with all of that stuff. And the Great Council of Chiefs, I'm sure the reason they rejected the renewed leases is because the government was now kind of controlled by the Indo-Fijians. And that is, it's like, yes, do they just want political power so that they can help the Itaukei and not fuck over the Indo-Fijians? Yes, but that's also kind of true of the Indo-Fijians. Like, you kind of have to assume that there's this long-standing beef between the Indo-Fijians and the Itaukei to the point where it's like, you have to assume that when an Indo-Fijian is elected prime minister, that's kind of going to be bad for the Itaukei. Might not be horrible, probably not a genocide or anything like that, but it's not going to be great for them, right? And that's probably what the the Great Council of Chiefs is thinking. They're probably thinking, yeah, he's probably not going to like put us in camps or anything, but he's going to fuck us over, and we don't want that because they probably recognize that that's the beginning of the end. And so it was also during this time when Painu, I just fucking had it up. Fuck, I'll Google it real quick. It's like the People's uh Party of National Unity. That's what Painu is. It's like this labor union. I think it's a political party, but it's also got a little bit of a labor union thing. So it was during this time that Painu leader Arasani, or wait, Apisai. Fuck, my handwriting is so bad, and these names don't help. I'll just say that. Like this is on me and the fucking crazy Melanesian names. Uh, Ipisai Torah threatened to topple the government with protests and civil disobedience. Once again, this is an Itauke group of people that are like, we're done. We're not dealing with the Indo-Fijian bullshit. You guys are left wing. We don't fuck with that. The Great Council of Chiefs has, our traditional leaders have kind of said fuck you by being like, we're not even going to negotiate land leases. We're not even going to go to the negotiating table and ask for some outrageous thing. We're not going to do that shit at all. And so yeah, Painu kind of gets involved with this little bit more of a modern, formal political thing. Gets involved and is like, I can have 50% of this population not working, so fuck you. Basically, there wasn't any like negotiation from Painu or anything. They were just like, we can and will fuck you guys over. That's basically what Painu's saying to the majority Indo-Fijian government at this point. And so several marches came in April of 2000, with a large one led by Fijian businessman Alicia Duvuloko, scheduled for May 19th. Anyone remember that date? May 19th? What happened that day? Anyone remember from the beginning of the podcast? It was when our boy George Speight says, fuck you, gets the special forces, and goes to take the parliament hostage. That's also when this like huge fucking march, this huge Painu march is planned for. It's also planned for May 19th. And so yeah, that's kind of the setup for the coup. We've established why coups are so popular in Fiji. It's because every once in a while the Indo-Fijians start to gain a whole lot of power, and the Itauke do not like that. And they're like, we need to go in and overthrow this government. And that's like why they do it, but it's also like, I don't know, man, make propaganda or something, right? I feel like that would be the better decision than just going in every 10, 13 years or whatever, 10, 15 years and overthrowing the government. I feel like you could make some pretty solid propaganda. It's a pretty sick, the Fijians are a pretty sick group of people. You know what I mean? They got kind of like that Polynesian tattoo thing going on, but they're still fucking like savage beasts. Like they have that history of that. I feel like they could make some pretty good propaganda off that and be like, vote for Itauke politicians only. But no, they're not doing that. And I don't even know if they're like accusing the Indo-Fijians of like how people are like the Jews run the world and the Jews run the Senate and Congress and all that shit. I don't even know if they're like, I think they're acknowledging that the Indo-Fijians like fairly won the elections, but at the same time being like, but fuck that bullshit. You know what I mean? It's like you won, but also fuck you. I'm going to show you what winning really looks like. And the Indo-Fijians don't seem to have an answer for it. There doesn't really seem to be an answer there from the boys, from the Mumbai boys. They don't. I don't think they have a response to a coup every time. The coup's coming. You know if a bunch of Indo-Fijians win seats in parliament, and especially if an Indo-Fijian becomes prime minister, that the boys are going to get activated. So you know what's happening, and they just don't do it. They're just fine with it. I guess it's just the setup that they have. They're frenemies, dude. It's fucking Buford and Baljeet. That's what the Itauke and the Indo-Fijians are. It's Buford and Baljeet. It's like, are you going to do a coup? You going to do a coup? Oh, man, fuck you. I hate you, man. I feel like at this point, that's what it has to be. Because you know the coup is coming. This is, so there was the two coups in 1987. There's this one in 2000, and then there was another in 2006. So the writing was on the wall. And the Indo-Fijians were just, fuck it, I'm not reading the writing on the wall, dude. Let's do it. Let's have a nice. The coup is just like it's their like Olympics or something like that. They're just waiting for it. They just want the coup to happen. I don't know. So they kind of know this coup is coming. They know that as soon as the Indo-Fijians start to gain a lot of political, although this one did happen pretty quick. This coup happened in 2000. This is 3 years after the new constitution and only 1 year after Chowdhury and this alliance, this coalition gains all these seats in parliament. So this one was pretty quick. They didn't have a ton of time to prepare for it, but it's also like it. I feel like it's obvious. I feel like it's obvious they're going for a coup at this point, but I guess not. So anyway, this is the coup. How does what goes down during this coup? What are the results of it? The results are they keep doing the coups for a reason. Spoiler alert: the ITOK understand the efficacy of the coup. They understand they get what they fucking want when they do a coup. That's why they keep doing it. I don't know. The Indo-Fijians are just pushovers, I guess. So anyway, I don't want to incite any like racial violence. I feel like I don't know. It could be contentious right now or whatever. Because spoiler alert, Speight he got freed recently. Speight's out and he's on the loose, dude. So I don't want to incite any ethnic tensions or violence or anything. Indo-Fijians, I'm sure you guys are great people, but I mean, I'd fucking do something about it. God damn. So anyway, so when George stormed the parliament, he was backed by the Fijian Counter-Revolutionary Warfare Unit, who provided him men and guns. So this is the special forces we were talking about, and it's so funny to say that for the Counter-Revolutionary Warfare Unit to be the ones doing the revolutionary warfare, and this is a little bit more like, you know how in like the 90s bank robbing got super big? Like going into a bank and like all the tellers knew the deal and they were just like, when a guy comes in with a gun and he asks for the money, you just give him the money and the police will find him or they won't. Like that was kind of the understanding of bank robbing in like the 80s and 90s, especially over, I mean really all over America, but I feel like the West Coast and like Boston was kind of the hub of bank robberies in the 80s and 90s and stuff like that. That's kind of what the coups are in Fiji in 2000, because not a ton of people end up getting like hurt or injured or anything, or only a few people die over the course of this whole big coup. And so that's kind of what the counter-revolutionary warfare unit is. It's just, hey, I have guns, but you guys know the deal. We know what's going on here, guys. Just open the vault, give me the money, and then I'll get in a police chase or whatever. That's kind of the understanding of this coup. It's just that it's how we do it in Fiji. All right, we just do a coup every now and then. It's a fun little fucking activity, nice team bonding exercise. We just do a coup, okay? And so they storm the parliament, and really, a lot of the, like I said, a lot of the Fijian politics and just everything about it is split along ethnic lines. And so I'm guessing that's what this Fijian counter-revolutionary warfare unit, but a lot of it also isn't. Like a lot of people, yeah, they don't like each other, but they would rather have like peace than coups every 3 years. You know what I mean? Like that's kind of, there is a lot of ethnic tension, but for the most part, people are just like, can we just stop it with the fucking coups and the riots and the whatever else? Okay, can we just stop that? So anyway, that's that's just kind of an understanding of the Fijian ethnic tensions. Is that yes, it's there, but it's not extreme to the point where they're both ready to just fucking destroy everything. You know what I mean? To prove the other group wrong or to take the other group out of power. A lot of Itauke and a lot of Indo-Fijians just want peace. It's like, yeah, they're kind of racist towards each other, but they just want peace. So anyway, but obviously the Fijian counter-revolutionary warfare unit is not is not one of those groups that just wants peace. And so anyway, Speight declared himself as interim president, and opposition MP, which MP is member of parliament, uh, Tanauki Silatolu, Tanauki Silatolu, he was declared as the prime minister, and Speight revoked the 1997 constitution as protesters surrounded the government house while mobs burned and looted Indo-Fijian shops. And so the actual main protest is all around this building, and they don't seem to be getting too violent. But I guess at the same time, these mobs of specifically like young people just started to pop off and just started breaking windows, stealing shit, burning stores down, uh, and stuff like that. So Spite, I don't know if that was part of his plan, was just to cause as much chaos as possible. I don't know if he was full, Joker mode or whatever. But that's just kind of what happens at this point because ethnic tensions are already so high. You know what I mean? And people are or not all, but a lot of the ITLK are unemployed. They're probably hurting for money and just generally pissed off. And so they start, specifically the young people, start burning and looting Indo-Fijian shops. And so, like I said, a lot of ethnic tension there, but they don't. It's not like they're tying people up and chopping their heads off or whatever. Yes, they're being racist. They're burning down shops. It's kind of like the Rodney King riots, where it was like, yeah, white people, there was like racism there from these big mobs of black people, and they were like beating white people up or whatever and like trashing their cars, but it wasn't, they weren't killing anybody. You know what I mean? It wasn't that extreme, but there was just a lot of ethnic tension, both in the Rodney King riots and here, but not to the point of genocide. And I think that's kind of why these coups keep happening, and that's kind of why you could look at these coups as like a good thing, because it's like, yes, do the Italke want political power, and will they probably subjugate the Indo-Fijians a little bit? Yeah, or at the very least isolate them, economically and politically. Yeah, they'll probably do that, but they're not gonna commit a genocide. And so that's why you kind of view the coups as a positive thing, because even for the coup to happen in the first place, Indo-Fijians kind of have to take a lot of political power. And so there at least is some kind of opportunity there. Obviously, the opportunity is going to be taken away from them pretty quickly, but there is some opportunity for Indo-Fijians to gain political and economic power in this situation. I don't know. I feel like I'm trying to justify the coup, but it's not as bad as you think. So anyway, on May 20th, 10 hostages were released after resigning, and Speight swore in Jope Seniloli as interim president. And so that was kind of that really all George Speight wants, and this is a big ask. This is a big ask, but it's one ask. He's not trying to reform the entire cultural, political, whatever. He's not trying to change everything. He just wants the ITLK and probably some of the more conservative parties, business-friendly parties, we'll say, back in power. He wants indigenous, business-friendly people back in power, because he probably got paid to do this or received a lot of money from doing this from a lot of those rich business people, but it is also very ethnic as well. And so the 10 people who resign and then get released, I think those were more left-wing, maybe not necessarily Indo-Fijians, but kind of on their side a little bit. Those are the 10 who get released. And you got to remember, 54 of 71 of these people, George wants to resign, or he wants them out of parliament. And so that's a lot of fun. I feel like 17 people running the parliament of Fiji, that's a lot. Or that's not a lot. That's not a lot of people. If you're going to have a parliament in Fiji, like I said, I think the ideal setup is like a chill dictator for Fiji, who can just kind of keep the peace and stuff like that. But if you're going to have a parliament, 17 people is not enough to run the parliament. No, I just feel like that's kind of obvious. But anyway, that's kind of what happens there. And so George kind of his demands are a little bit outlandish, but I mean, I guess not that outlandish, because like I said, spoiler alert, they kind of all get met. And so anyway, outside of George Speight and his takeover of Parliament, 200 rebels confronted soldiers, and a mob burned down a TV station. And in response to this, the president, who was the actual president, Ratu Mara, resigned, and RFMF commander Frank Baini Marama, I'm just going to call him Frank. Frank took control at the behest of the government. And so RFMF is the Republic of Fiji Military Forces. And so, like I said, there was a lot of ethnic loyalty in the military. That's kind of how we got the counter-revolutionary warfare unit in the first place. But most of the people in the military, and I don't know if it's a majority Italk or if it's kind of there's a lot of Indo-Fijians in it. I don't know, but they just want peace, and so that's kind of what Frank's whole thing is. He kind of has like a little military junta to counter this uh, kind of business backed, economically backed coup, and that's why Frank ends up taking over. And he was basically told to do this. There was like judges and a few member of parliament or a few members of parliament weren't at the government house that day, and obviously the president wasn't either. And so they all get together and they're trying to figure out a solution, and it just goes to shit pretty much instantly. And so this guy Ray Tumara, however you say his name, he's like, "Fuck it, I'm resigning. I'm kind of fucking this whole situation up," and it's a chaotic situation. You know, we got these people burning down TV stations, and the TV station got burned down because it put they ran like some news story about George Speight, and it put him in a negative light. And so all these people got together and burned down this news station. And some of those 200 rebels who confronted the soldiers were defectors from the military. And so it's just so fucking chaotic that the president's like, all right, we need the military in power. And that's what Frank does. And so Frank declared martial law and demanded that Speight release the hostages and receive amnesty. So he like suspends the fucking constitution, no habeas corpus. The dragon banner is flying. If you remember the Black Douglas episode, he's fully going against George. And he's like, fuck you. He actually has a lot of the same interests as George, as we'll come to find out. But he's like, we're not giving in to your demands. We do not negotiate with terrorists. George, get the fuck out of there. We'll give you amnesty, but we're not giving in to your fucking demands. All right? That's kind of what Frank does. That's how he deals with the situation. He's a military guy. All right? He does end up going to Parliament later, but he's a military guy. He knows force. That's how he operates. He's like, he's not going to negotiate with you. He's not going to bring in some fucking faggy hostage negotiator who's like, I understand what you're going through. It's not the way our boy Frank operates. All right? Frank is like, fuck you, George. We can't have this lawlessness. Maybe I agree with you. Maybe I agree with you that the Italk should be the ones in power in this country, but we can't have these coups. We can't have this lawlessness and all this bullshit. We can't have, people living in fear that every 6 months or whatever, Parliament's going to get taken hostage. Get the fuck out of that building, release all the hostages, and I'll give you amnesty. All right? I will give you amnesty, George, but you need to listen to me. That's what Frank's saying at this point. So he's not necessarily politically against George, but he is against his actions. He does not fuck with the coups. He does not fuck with the chaos. He wants order. It's what he wants. And so obviously Speight refused, and facing mounting domestic and global pressure, Frank named Lassina Karasi as prime minister, who would head an all Italk Fijian government. So you're probably thinking, okay, well, that's what George wanted. George wanted the Italk to be back in power. It's what he claimed to represent. He said, fuck the 1997 Constitution. An Indo-Fijian will never be our prime minister. I represent the Great Council of Chiefs. So you'd think this would make George very happy. The fact that an Italk has been made prime minister and pretty much everyone in the government is going to be Italk. You think that would make George happy, but not really. George is a little bit, he's not just in it for the movement. He's not just in it backing his ethnic group. He kind of wants to be the hero a little bit. As we'll come, he wants to be the hero. And so this unilateral decision enraged Speight, and a gun battle broke out, and 5 people were injured. And I'm guessing the gun battle was at Parliament between the Counter-Revolutionary Warfare Unit and the RFMF forces commanded by Frank. So just a nice little gun battle. Over the course of this, I'll see if I can find the casualty numbers. I don't even think 10 people died. Yeah, and so on the On the RFMF side, 3 soldiers were killed and 1 policeman were killed, and then on the revolutionary George Speight side, 4 people were killed. And so yeah, not even 10. 8 people were killed over the course of this coup. Like I said, Fiji knows how to handle a fucking coup. They know how to do this shit. All right. And the way you do it, I guess, is by just instantly giving in to the demands. Because Frank, I'm sure he was kind of politically on the side of George, like I said, where he's like, I do want an all Autake government. But it's also like you can't, because then if the Indo-Fijians get any power back, or the Aitauke aren't acting how the rest of people want them to act, or let's say the Indo-Fijians are like, dude, this keeps fucking working for the Aitauke, I'll do the coup myself. It's just, that's why you don't negotiate with terrorists. It's because everyone else is gonna be like, fucking that guy got his way, then I'll do it too. But anyway, eventually, after all his demands had been met, Speight signed the. Oh wait, nope, skipped a line there. Sorry. Across the country, chaos escalated. Soldiers mutinied, rebels blocked the roads and took over a police station, and prisoners rioted. So we already talked a little bit about some of the defection to the revolutionary side. I guess a whole lot more of that happened, especially within groups that were like a majority Aitauke. They were like, "Fuck this, dude! I'm not fighting for the Indo-Fijians. I'm not gonna go fight my own people to defend another group. Like, I'm not gonna do that." So they end up doing a couple mutinies. The rebels, I think they burned down the police station too. Obviously, you gotta have a little bit of fun. And the prisoners, I I don't even know if they gave a shit about this whole thing, but they kind of saw their opportunity and took it. They were like, dude, I want fucking mac and cheese 2 days a week. So they have a little riot. And so Frank, that's kind of why he ends up giving in. And at this point, dude, tourism had declined in Fiji, but it only declined by like 30%, which is fucking insane. Like over the course of this coup, tourism only declined by 30%. Although I imagine a lot of this was pretty local. I imagine it's kind of like a Mexico situation where it's like technically yes, Cabo is in Mexico, but it's kind of separated from all that shit. You know, I'm sure a lot of these rich business people who own these resorts and stuff are able to pay off rebels or have their own private security forces to defend the hotels and keep them kind of isolated. And so anyway, eventually after all his demands had been met, like I said, Speight signed the Maunakau Accord, whatever it's called, and he agreed to release the hostages after Josefa Iloilo after Josefa Iloilo was named president. And so he kind of retreats, and yes, he does gain amnesty and all his demands have been met, but for some reason, him and all his boys go to like this abandoned school on the outskirts of the capital, and they're just like chilling there. And it's like 500 or 400 dudes chilling out there for some reason. And so, anyway, on July 26th, Speight was arrested after making threats to President Iloilo, and he was sentenced to death, but he received a presidential pardon in 2024. So Frank's back out. He's back on the loose. He's ready. He's itching for another coup. Frank wants a coup, or George wants a coup. And the guy Frank that we were talking about, like I said, there was a coup in 2006, and in 2007, Frank became the prime minister, and he maintained his position as prime minister for 17 years until 2024. So I don't know if Frank was part of that 2006 coup, but Fiji's got too many fucking coups to deal with, dude. Too many coups over in Fiji. All right, like I said, call it the chicken coop, because we're dealing with a lot of fucking coups. And so yeah, that's the story of the 2000 Fiji coup. Worked out well. Speight does end up going to prison for about 24 years there, but he gets released. And a lot of other people got charged with treason and things like that over the course of this. But our main guy, Speight, the figurehead of this whole thing, got all his demands met, and still for some reason was making threats to President Iloilo. And just very stupidly doing all that because at this point, this is July 26th. The coup ended earlier in July. Like that's when the Manakuna whatever accord was signed. That happened earlier in July, and so the RFMF they had like police checkpoints all over the island. They're all over Fiji, and so he just like ran into a not a police checkpoint, a fucking military checkpoint, and he ends up getting arrested there after making all these threats. And then the RFMF like storms this abandoned school that all his boys are chilling at, and all of them get arrested. Like 500 or 400 people get fucking arrested. So he got all his demands met, and then he kept fighting. I don't know what. George just got that dog in him. There's nothing else to say. He's a fucking pit bull mauling a toddler. He's got a lot of fight in him. But all right, that's all I've got for this episode. Getting my wisdom teeth out tomorrow, so that's why I'm recording all this stuff early. But I hope everyone listening has a good day, good week, good year, good life. If you want to do a coup, go to Fiji because it seems to work every time. And I'll see you guys in the next episode. Ping.